Cheers! Welcome to Culture Night,
where each week we're drinking fancy wine and watch movies that are in some way culturally significant. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Sarah, and we are back for Season 5, Episode 7. And we just want to say thank you. Start things off by thanking everybody for listening, whether you're watching on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or listening on YouTube. We appreciate you being here.
So I don't think we have any podcast business this week, so let's hop right into what are we drinking this week?
This week we are drinking the 2020 Cabernet Sauvignon from Spyglass Wines in Paso Robles, California. Now, again, just a reminder for this season, we are not drinking Tobin James wine. Sadly, we do miss it. Mm-hmm. But we decided to just lean into the RomCom theme and go to the grocery store and get some cheap...
medium shelf.
Yeah, medium shelf. I hate to say cheap red wine because these are not like $3 a bottle, but like some cheaper red wines that, to kick back, watch a rom-com and enjoy.
And are a little more accessible to people following along with us at home.
Yes.
So let's give it this sniff test. A little berry.
Yeah, I was going to say cherry.
It smells a little tart. I don't know if that's a thing, but...
I do get a lot of alcohol smell too.
Give it a little taste.
Yep.
It tastes exactly as it smells.
Yep.
Very berry, cherry,
and alcohol. Mm-hmm. But it's not overpowering like some wines we've had.
Some raisin.
I know you love to taste raisin, but I just have a hard time finding the raisin taste.
I get raisin, a little bit of raisin sauce, to be honest. So I have that level of sweetness there.
Yeah, it's enjoyable though. I like it so far.
Mm-hmm. We'll see. We'll give our thoughts after the movie, as always. So let's now, I don't think we have any behind the screens segments this week.
Not today. We're just happy to be here. So with that, I think we should just jump right into our Slept On It segment where we are going to discuss the movie we watched last time, which was Bridget Jones's Diary. Does your rating change after sleeping on it? You rated it a 2.8 and I rated it a 4.8.
So it's been like a month since we last
at the very least, it's been a month.
Yeah. So it's been quite a while since we actually watched this movie.
Summertime, man, has just gotten away from us.
I go to 2.5. If anything, my rating would change for the lower after sleeping on it down to like a 2.3. Just was not very enjoyable for me. I don't really feel any desire to like watch the sequels. And I kind of almost feel like worse having watched it because I like thought it was going to be a better movie based on like it being culturally significant than I was expecting. So my rating just goes down.
That is an interesting thought. But I don't disagree with you. And I think that's maybe something I need to go back and like revisit our list of movies of, do I actually feel worse having watched it because it wasn't what I expected in a bad way?
It's like one of those like Schrodinger's movies. Like, you I guess you're trying to think of the time before you'd seen it and like you had this idea like what it could be. But as soon as you've seen it now, that's what it is and that's what it's going to be. But before you'd seen it, it could have been a great movie. It could have been funny. It could have been worth seeing.
You've got your thinking hat on today. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, 4.8 is not the worst score I've ever given. And I don't really know that I changed it maybe to like a 4.5 because there were elements of it that I really enjoyed. I do wish it wasn't quite so long. And maybe like if you were out of town and it was on like one of the sequels was on, I'd be interested just kind of see how, do they get any better or do they change anything from it? But I'm not going to go out of my way to like watch the sequels.
Yeah. I'd probably maybe check out the Wikipedia plot summary before I want to commit another hour plus of my time for that.
Yeah. So needless to say, Bridget Jones' Diary has not been our favorite so far. But with that, I will jump into some quick fact snacks.
All right.
And just share some behind the scenes fun that I found on the internet. So my first fact snack is that the director sent out a knitting challenge to between 20 and 30 knitters to get Mark's ugly Christmas sweater in the opening scene right. The like reindeer one that we both were like, that's pretty dope. And she like hated on.
Yeah.
So
I guess
super
the
tacky.
ugly Christmas sweater trend took off after this movie for sure.
Definitely. So I thought it was interesting that it wasn't like they went out and bought it. They literally had to ask people to make this.
I feel like for a while you had to like find them at Goodwill or something and they were actually tacky. And then suddenly now like, you just go to Target and you can have a whole bunch of different options around Christmas time of an ugly Christmas sweater. So it's kind of changed in what it means, but I can totally believe that at the time.
Definitely. I would love to see the other contenders. What were the runner-ups to the reindeer? My next fact snack is that besides perfecting her English accent, Renee Zellweger, it's a little tongue tie there. She actually went to work as a publishing assistant to get into the role, and she actually invited her boss from that time to be an extra in the show, which I thought was pretty cool. I do love when people like really get into character like that. Like we've been watching The Bear season 3, and we're just so deeply obsessed. And like they went into kitchens and they like really worked and they learned that experience. And I just feel like that makes things so much better. Obviously, the publishing thing was much less of a subplot than something like The Bear, but I do appreciate when actors go out of their way to kind of get into
I think
character.
it's kind of like, so most people view it as like a sign of like a really good actor, you know, how much effort they put into it. On the other hand, I'm almost like, is it really a sign of a good actor if you have to do that to get into character? You like have to go on scene and immerse yourself and basically become that person. Because at that point, you're less acting as much as you are just changing. To an extent. An actor who can have like almost no context but can just suddenly just pretend to be someone else and be believable, I think is a better actor. I know everyone like loves on Daniel Day-Lewis because he does all the crazy stuff to get into character, but I don't know. I
very much appreciate your viewpoint, and I think it depends on the character and it depends on what they're putting themselves into. Her working as a publishing assistant, like I think she was just mostly sitting at a desk, so I don't know how much that really added to her, rendition of the character. But again, like something for The Bear, like that is so technical, and that is a hard headspace to just get into. Like I think you have to kind of experience that firsthand. That I do like your take that sometimes I think it's lazy as opposed to being like this sign of a great actor.
Paradoxically lazy. It seems like it should be like, the lazy one would just be, you show up and just read off the script and but really it's like could be construed as lazy because you're not actually acting as much as you are just being around it, and then it's kind of like it just becoming too automatic and instinctual. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that take. I like that. Okay, my next fact snack is that the fight scene between Mark and Daniel was actually not choreographed at all, and they had
a real fight.
Yeah, they had brought in like stunt coordinators for it, and the glass in the restaurant was stunt people, obviously. Yeah. But they found that the actors were funnier when they were just doing it themselves, and I also read somewhere that they'd originally wanted the scene to be kind of like sexy, like, oh, these men fighting for me. But then they realized that Colin Firth and God, what's his name? Hugh Grant. They realized that's like not really who their characters were, and so they just kind of let them go, and they thought the comedy of it, which, like I said, that was one of my favorite scenes because I thought it was hilarious, just like going from nothing to just completely fall apart.
The fight just went way longer than I thought it was going to be.
It was. I heard somewhere, I think it was on a podcast, where like sometimes like a joke is funny 3 times and then it's not funny, but then like you get to the 17th time and then it's funny again, where it was like almost one of those, like it went long enough where I was like, okay, I still think it's funny. And then my next one is that the production crew didn't lock down the streets for the filming of the movie, and so when she has to run out into the street like in her underwear, like the street was not closed. There was like people and buses. They had to, I think it says we had to wait for buses to like pass through, and then she would run out in the street in her underwear. And I mean, that's commitment.
Yeah. I guess they were just trying to go low budget there or something.
I guess. I mean, and it's not like she was like naked in the street. That would have been more extreme. I mean, being in your underwear is like being in a bathing suit, and supposedly it was filmed in the summertime. So
weird.
Not horrible, but that's almost like Marilyn Monroe, like everybody coming to watch her dress blow up.
Yeah, I guess if you don't shut down the street, the people don't know to come to watch it, and then it actually is just people there. A little more realistic as opposed to having to have people keep all the hordes of people out of the frame.
Yeah. And then my last fact snack is that the cigarettes that Renee Zellweger was using were actually herbal cigarettes, not real cigarettes. So I don't know what actually makes an herbal cigarette different from a regular one, but they were apparently not as terrible.
Yeah, I feel like breathing into any smoke probably is not great.
I would guess not.
But at least it doesn't have nicotine in it, I suppose.
Yeah, so that about wraps it up for my fact snacks. Any other thoughts?
No, I mean, like I said, I didn't really enjoy it, so we can go ahead and just move on if you want to.
Sounds good to me. So let's move into what are we watching tonight?
Tonight we are watching The Notebook from 2004. It is rated PG-13.
So we have been doing one movie from every decade, and we decided to throw this one in as a bonus because Bridget Jones was 2001, I believe. And we have been trying to do movies, rom-coms that we haven't seen, obviously, especially for me. I've seen a lot of rom-coms, so we were really trying to do ones that we hadn't seen before. But we just felt like The Notebook was just too iconic of a rom-com to not include it in this season. So we are throwing this one in there.
Is it a rom-com or is it more of like a romance movie though?
I don't know. Let's do a quick Wikipedia. I still have the wiki open. It says romance comedy.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess there are a couple.
The Notebook, PG-13, 2004, romance/comedy. 2 hours, 1 minute.
I feel like this one is going to lean not to spoil the rom versus com, but I think it's going to lean more heavily towards the romance than the comedy, but we'll see.
I think it's been a while since I've seen this movie, and I think it got to a point where it was just like a background movie. I will say, I've not been, spoiler alert, we've seen this movie, but I was never like obsessed with it like a lot of people were. So I've not seen it too many times, but it was always like, okay, like I know what happens, that I'll be interesting to pay attention to that comedy. And like, is there funnier stuff in here that we just like kind of have overlooked over the years? So we'll see.
Well,
anyways,
before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's hop into our time machine back to 2004. Where the top 3 movies released that year were Shrek 2, grossing $438 million, Spider-Man 2, grossing $373 million, and The Passion of the Christ, grossing $370 million. Can say that I've seen the first 2, and I still have yet to see the third one.
I've definitely seen the first one. I would have to see which Spider-Man 2 is and what all that is. There's so much out there now.
Maguire.
I definitely saw the first one. I don't know.
Dr. Octavius, Dr. Octopus one.
But can I also say that Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban was in number 5, and The Incredibles was number 4. So it was in some other
pretty stacked year for movies.
Some other pretty great movies up there.
The top 3 songs released that year. Talk about some bangers. Yeah by Usher, featuring Lil Jon and Ludacris. Burn by Usher, and If I Ain't Got You by Alicia Keys.
I find it comical because you literally just made a joke about Burn by Usher either today or yesterday. Like 2
hours ago, and I had thought about that song in probably 20 years.
I was looking this list up and I was like, well, at least it's still topical 20 years later. But that's, I think, wasn't really occurring to me until I was saying that The Notebook was from 2004 2 seconds ago, realizing that this movie is 20 years old. Ugh.
That feels about right, to be honest. I think it's been around for a while.
It does, but it just like hurts to say it. Because I mean, like, I vividly remember this coming out. This was like the beginning of my, I'm into rom-com movies, I'm 13 years old kind of time, that now it's like, oh God, 20 years ago. Ugh.
We've already covered Have You Seen It Before. I won't go too much into what we know about this movie because, we've just seen it. And instead, I'll talk about the first time I heard about this movie really was that my brother and his girlfriend were like reading the book like together so they could like talk about it. And my brother does not read books. It's like just not something he does. And it was very out of character that I remember like seeing this, like what is this stupid thing? Like The Notebook. It's like a book about notebooks or something. I'm obviously younger than my brother and was very confused about it. And then like years later, it's like, I realized it was actually a movie or something like that. But I'll always think about that, like
oh my God.
Seeing that book like on his, in his room, like, what do you don't read?
That is hilarious. That, you
I
learn
wouldn't put it
something
past
new
him
every
to have
day.
also just like gone to the Cliff Notes, even though they were like reading it together.
Probably. I will say I've read almost all of Nicholas Sparks' book, but I'm pretty sure I haven't read this one because I'd already seen the movie by the time I was really reading his books. And I don't think I ever went back and read it.
Yeah. I feel like it's like written in a like actual like letters like type way, but I might be totally wrong on that. I myself have not read it, but.
Well, I'm probably going to just go ahead and add this to my reading list because why not?
Go.
All right. So I think with that, we can just jump into the movie.
Sure. We'll catch you guys on the other side.
Time for The Notebook.
Cheers.
Cheers. That was The Notebook. Oh.
Welcome back, everyone.
I have not been hit that hard by that movie. I don't think ever.
I think it definitely hits differently. The like further along in life you are, like as like a teenager, you're like, oh, that's so cute. And then you get married, and then you have kids. And you're like at each phase, you're like, yeah, it's a bit harder.
I mean, honestly, like they have their flaws, but their end is couple goals. Like
the dream going out together,
right? Whew. Oh God, I can't.
Well, take your mind off it.
I don't ever cry about things. This is so hard. Anyways, can we talk about wine, please?
Let's go to the wine scale. So our wine scale generally is a 0 to 10 scale. Obviously 10 being great, 0 being okay, because generally the wines we drink on this show are Tobin James very good wines. That being said, this season, as we mentioned earlier, we're drinking like medium shelf wines. So the wine scales is generally a bit more comprehensive and realistic. Generally, like below a 5 is kind of like leave it. Above 5 is kind of a take it. And, it's still really subjective.
It is so subjective.
That being said, I'm going to give this wine a 7.2.
I was going to give it a 7.
Mm-hmm.
I thought you were going to be a little judgy with my 7, but I really enjoyed this wine. It was really good.
I thought it was very easy to drink, not too alcohol forward, had good flavor to it. Like we mentioned, the notes earlier with the fruit and the cherry, and
wasn't overly sweet.
Yeah, it was delightful to drink and got slightly better, over time. But overall, it was a very good wine. So I will keep in mind the Spyglass Cab Sav from Paso.
Yeah, I fluctuated between like
the 2020, by the way,
like a 6.5 to like a 7.5. And I didn't want to get like too overconfident with my number.
I was hovering around a 7, and then it got that slight bump at the end because it was very delightful.
It was really good. I was about to take a sip of we're still on the Kirkland box wine for those following the box wine saga. And then I remembered I needed to go through with my score before I could take a sip because it skews your rating.
Yeah. This honestly isn't as jarring as some ones we've had in the past where we've gone from the Tobin James wines to the black box, which then it made the black box feel like just offensively sweet.
Yeah, this is much better for sure. So,
anyways, moving on to the movie rating out of 10. This one is still subjective. I kind of have my own criteria, generally being like rewatchability, quotability, how much I enjoyed it, cultural significance, whatnot. This season also taking into consideration the RomCom value of it. I will let you go first since I went first with the last one. I
was wondering, I don't like to force myself to have to go first, but if you're going to let me go, or if you're going to go volunteer to go first, I let you go first. So I am going to give this an 8.1.
8.4.
And you're even higher than me. I'm shocked.
As I was watching the movie, I was kind of going through thinking of, how I'd rate it and then trying to think of reasons why it might be higher or lower.
It's really good. It's just really good.
I'll let you go first for your.
Okay. So, kind of similarly to how I felt about the wine, I was kind of back and forth because there's so much about their relationship that I don't feel like is an excellent role model and is, and like the fight,
each other, the fighting, the arguing, bickering.
When you're teenagers, sure, and the like it's just what we do, but like you don't have to fight all the time. Like that doesn't have to be what your relationship is.
You could podcast instead.
I don't know, just saying. Speaking from personal experience, you don't have to like bicker like that all the time. So like things like that where I was just like, do I give this an 8? But then just like the whole time I'm watching it, I'm just kind of smiling a little bit because it has the nostalgic factor, especially at this point being 20 years old. And like I think one of my notes is like watching this as a 30-year-old versus watching this as a teenager and like processing like what the differences of those are. And there's so much of like as a teenager, it's like you want someone that wants you that fiercely, that's gonna do those grand gestures, and that's like so much of that is so exciting to like teenage me, and like so much else of it is exciting to me now as a 30-year-old. And I think like kind of because it spans so much of their lives, like it grows with you and you like certain parts of it as you get older and appreciate different things. And like,
yeah, that was a big reason for the high rating for me was that I've watched it several times throughout my life and I've liked it differently, but better each time. Like
I like it better now. I did.
Yeah. I want to hate it because everyone's loved it so much and was just so obsessed with it. And I want to be like, oh, it was trash. But at no point have I ever watched this movie and been like, that was bad. That was not good or enjoyable.
So I will say my first time watching this movie was, so I was in chorus in high school. If you've watched the musical seasons, you probably know that. And we went on these like trips every year and we took buses. So, and we would like drive, like we went to Orlando, we went to Nashville, we went to Atlanta, like we were on the bus a long time. And one of those years, I can't remember which one, someone put the Notebook on the like little tiny TVs on these buses circa 2006, 7, whenever. I don't remember when we watched it. And that was the first time I'd ever seen it was on this bus because I remember the hype about it, but I just like hadn't seen it. And so like I'm watching it with 50 other high schoolers, maybe more than that. I don't know how many people are on a bus. And so like, I'm trying to watch it, but like, we're all like hanging out as loud. So like, and then we get to the end and I was like, okay, like, yeah, it's sad, but like, I don't know. But like that environment was very not conducive to watching this for the first time.
Watching on a crappy little 12-inch TV. So
like, that's where I first started with it. And so obviously it's going to get better with time because like watching it in that environment was not conducive to it. But, and you know, being at this point where I've been married for a while and like being in a relationship and just like
having kids and
that whole like arc of life, it means something different now that like it's just gets better.
Yeah. I think there were some parts towards the beginning where I didn't really love like the acting and the production quality and the believability. Like I'll talk about some of that in my notes in a little bit. Felt kind of like a stretch, but overall I just love the overall theme and the just overall story of it. And I also love that they didn't like portray the other guy, James Marsden's character, as being like just an absolute asshole that like, you know, she has no business being with, and like made it a really conflicting choice.
And I don't think I remembered that part of it as much. And I like when he was like, you know, like I want you to want me back, or, you know, however he phrases it. And just like that whole scene where they're kind of parting towards the end. I don't remember him being so like gracious about it all and being such like a good guy that no wonder why she was so upset. It was a hard choice.
Yeah. That part has always struck out to me of being like, man, that's like a really interesting plot point where I feel like a lot of movies and shows now are kind of trending towards that, where it's not just a clear cut, like, oh, you know,
it's so much more interesting.
Yeah. Makes a much better story. The way that it kind of like, you know, tugs at your heartstrings and tells a story. And it's not necessarily as quotable as it is like some of the iconic moments, like the paddling when the rainstorm, the like, you know, what do you want scene, like so many of those that just, I feel like also the Notebook became such like a powerful like movie in its time of like everyone had seen it, and it was like a cultural phenomenon at the time. And that's not necessarily the reason why we should like it, but I just fully understand why it was such a huge movie in its time, because I just thoroughly enjoyed the movie.
And I think it like being that we were in that like teenage stage when this movie came out, we were in that cultural like group of people that were obsessed with it. Like, and we were probably on like the very outskirts of the people that were super into it at the time. And just like, kind of like with Bridget Jones growing up, like you hear about it, but I don't really know anything about it. But like we grew up and we knew the hype about this.
This one lived up to the hype.
For sure.
So moving on to the next question, our
movie description.
Culture questionnaire is the movie description. I will go first as always. Guy meets girl in like the 1940s? 1940s. And yeah, because I guess
they meet in 1940 something. They say it as
World War II, whatever. Fall in love, like summer lovin' happened so fast, as they say.
They had them a blast, that's for sure.
Reunite years later, rekindle their love. Lots of other relationship drama ensues and ends in true love. No spoiler alerts.
Really glossing over a lot of details there, but
yada yada yada.
And you didn't give any adjectives. I need you to start being more descriptive about the characters.
That's your job. You need to give them all a label.
All right, so the description according to the TV is an epic love story centered around an older man who reads aloud to a woman with Alzheimer's from a faded notebook. The old man's words bring to life the story about a couple who is separated by World War II. I don't think World War II is what really separates them.
No, that was not it.
And is then passionately reunited 7 years later after they've taken different paths. I think that like gives away a lot of plot points, but like glosses over a lot.
Yeah, someone who like skimmed over and read the wrong pages.
It's like your brother's reading the smart notes of this book.
Kind of picked up on the wrong notes there. Separated by the distance between Charleston, South Carolina, and New York City, maybe more so than New York,
or separated by like her parents' inability to see past class differences.
That as well. Yeah, not enough adjectives or labels on the characters in there.
I wanted like feisty Allie Hamilton and
the infatuated. Or, I don't know.
There's a lot.
Love struck.
Yes.
Love struck. Noah. Yeah, it's pretty good. I think mine is a little better.
I think yours is pretty vague. Usually yours are better.
Theirs was specific, but not on the right way.
Yeah.
How well did it age?
No, was the movie what you expected?
Oh, sorry. Was the movie what you expected? Yeah, we've seen it before.
Yes, I've seen it before, but I also, like I've already said, like taken more from it, so it's like even better.
That being said, the Notebook itself, I feel like wasn't as prominently understood. I guess it kind of gets at the end where it's like, oh, tell me the story and I'll come back to you. It's not as clear that he's reading to her from a notebook. It's really in the last like couple minutes that you really understand that. You don't see her like taking notes or anything that kind of like leads you to understand that up until the very end.
Yeah. It is a title that you kind of have to, like, if you came into this movie completely blind and just someone sat you down and it's like, we're going to watch a rom-com today. It's called The Notebook. And then you watch, or you don't even find out that it's called The Notebook till afterwards. I guess you'd be like, yeah, I guess.
Yeah. If we were like going in blind, like what would you call this movie having seen it? I don't even know what I would like.
Are we just going to skip down to, does the title fit the movie? Did the title, they say the title of the movie?
Yeah.
Should we just get there in a second?
Yeah, we'll get there in a second. Movie what you expected. We kind of covered that. How well did it age?
I think, I mean, it's like a period piece in itself.
So
in the
like 40s,
it's fine.
Love after that. Could the movie be made today?
Yeah.
Yes. And this is one of my notes, but I would love them to remake this into a miniseries.
Yes.
And really kind of like stretch the story out.
Yes, because one of my early thoughts, I don't think I actually wrote it down, was like, I feel like we just like are thrown into the deep end. Like we don't really get to know the older people from the start. And then it's like, I'm going to read you a story. And then all of a sudden they're like, he's climbing on the Ferris wheel. And then they're sitting in the movies. And then she's like, we're going to go on a walk. And it's like,
right? Like she hates him. They go to a movie where generally don't talk much. And then they come out and they're like infatuated with each other. And I'm like, okay, where they skimmed over a lot there.
It's a 2-hour movie. And they really like slam on the gas in the first like 15 minutes and then drag it out.
But imagine this in like a modern miniseries show where you'd be like on episode like 5 or 6, whatever. You kind of think you have your understanding of the characters and how they act, but then they have a one of those special episodes where it just is entirely the background of the mom. It tells her story, shows her summer, and suddenly you're like, oh man, now I totally get like why she feels this way about Noah. And you would just kind of see it told entirely. Like none of the other characters would be in that episode, and you would see that background and you'd be like, wow, okay. I feel entirely differently about the situation. I understand their motives differently. I think like a 10 to 12 part miniseries, this could be so well done.
For sure. And I'm really, although there are times where I'm like, I miss the 22 to 24, 5, 6 episode seasons because I just want more content from these shows that are fantastic. But at the same time, like if you're going to give me a lot of really good content or instead of telling it in a 2-hour movie, you're going to tell this story the way it needs to be told in whatever 8, number of 10, 13, something obscure, like number of episodes. I'm really appreciating that it's not like, well, because the studios say you have to put out 24 episodes a year, you're going to put out
24 episodes, and they all have to be exactly 42 minutes long.
And not 1 second more because commercials that like, it's like, oh, this episode's going to be 56 minutes and this one's going to be 43 minutes and this one's going to be 1 hour and 7 minutes because this is how the story's meant to be told. I so appreciate that about how television and film and all of that is evolving now. And I do really, especially, I was not expecting you to say the mom in episode 5 or 6. And I feel like that would be an excellent.
Right?
Oh,
one of
so
those
good.
little like curveballs that you get midway through a miniseries. Like, oh man, that'd be so good.
Really good. We digress.
So anyway, it's going to be made today. Yes, please remake it today.
It has recently been released as a musical on Broadway.
Okay, hate that. But
Ingrid Michaelson wrote the soundtrack, so I feel like that'd be pretty great.
I don't know who that is.
We'll have conversation about this later.
Please don't hurt me.
I am not Allie. I'm not going to start beating you up.
Did they say the title of the movie in the movie?
No.
I don't even think they mentioned a notebook. You see it, but they don't mention it.
I mean, even like, I almost like, does the title fit the movie? Dropping into that. I almost feel like the letters are more important and more symbolic in the movie than the actual. And I know the notebook like links it back to the older people, but I feel like of the two, I get why they call it the notebook with the older people, but the letters seem so like important in the movie.
It would almost be better if like the Notebook was just a compilation like of those letters, and she'd been writing to him, and the mom had been like intercepting them to not being sent or whatever, and it was basically telling their story like through that in a way. Yeah,
but that would only tell like a year-ish of
right. Well, based on how this movie was, if they changed all that too, it could be like they were writing each other's letters for those 7 years or something. And I don't know. I don't know. I'm trying to think of like any other better title. It's like The Memory of Love or Love Amnesia, like all that.
Everything gets too cheesy.
Yeah.
Like I feel like the Notebook doesn't really give anything away with its with what it is about. That I appreciate that.
Remember Me. No, that title was taken a couple years later.
It was taken later.
Robert Pattinson movie.
Were there any actors who went on to do bigger things? Do we argue that Dan Scott from One Tree Hill, as the background actor of the boyfriend of the mom,
I think
he is uncredited in this, and this is before One Tree Hill.
I think he is probably the one that most went on to do bigger things. There were other big actors, obviously. We mentioned James Marsden. I don't know where this was in his career. E from Entourage. I forget the actor's name.
Kevin Connolly.
He, I think Entourage was already going on before this. So I don't know if it was on. I guess Entourage itself was about on par, if not bigger than this at the time. Those were kind of the main ones I think that I saw from there.
Yeah. I want to say every time I watch this, I'm like, is that Dan Scott from One Tree Hill? And every time I'm like, yes, it is.
So I think he is the clear answer for that, for actor that went on to do bigger things.
Because he started out as a basketball player for the Canadian national team.
So he actually did play basketball?
Yep.
Wow.
And then he went on to be the love interest of the mom in the Notebook and Dan Scott from One Tree Hill.
Did they ever show him playing basketball in One Tree Hill?
He plays as like the father, like a father-son game at least once, and then they have like throwbacks, but I don't think it's like not him.
Yeah, weird. Next question: Rom versus Com.
Yeah, I added that into this part because I feel like we need to be, because we always forget about it, that we need to like actually talk about percentages.
Like the continuum or the scale of how Rom is versus how Com. I would call this probably 80% Rom, 20% Com.
I had it as 90-10 because I I was not laughing very much during this. I felt like it was much more about their relationship. There was not, I think, like especially coming off, we just recently watched A Family Affair with Zac Efron and
that was much
Joey King, and like we laughed during that. Like that was like a laugh out loud kind of movie, not like crying laughing, but like there were times where I was like, oh, that's a joke, like that's funny, and I don't think I felt that almost at all. Like there were some times where I was like, oh, like they did that, like
they were being cute. It wasn't necessarily funny.
It was not as much funny. That this was much more about their relationship than about anything like comedic.
See, I don't remember like any comedic parts of it. That a couple parts that I did kind of laugh or see the humor in it, or like, and also like when he's like towards the end, like the "What do you want?" like scene where he's yelling at her. It's kind of like he's like laughing in a way, like it's kind of like not quite full comedy, but I can see some of those aspects of it. It's kind of why I give it the 80. I was gonna go 75, but I think that's too much. It's not quite that funny. So I think somewhere between the 80 and 90%.
Yeah, 90 felt too aggressive because it's not like it was like a super serious movie, but
we'll say 85.
Yeah. We'll just be in the middle, 85-15. But it was, I mean, this movie is about their romance. It is not trying to be cute and funny about it.
Like before we watched it, I was like, how much of a rom-com actually even is this?
And you were right. It was more of a rom than a com.
For sure. What impact do you think the movie had on pop culture?
A big one. I mean,
everyone who was anyone had seen The Notebook at the time. It just was like the archetype of like
they mentioned this movie in One Tree Hill.
Oh really?
There's a whole like episode about being notebooked. Crossover. Yeah, you're notebooked, and I didn't even put together that Dan Scott's actually in it.
That's hilarious. It just like it like was like the what are you gonna do? You guys are gonna go on like a cute date and like watch The Notebook or something and cry? Like it just was like what.
Yeah.
The epitome of that.
And it was known like you're going to watch it and you're going to cry. And so that's why I was really disappointed when I didn't cry the first time I watched it, but I also was not really set up in a place to cry during it. It was something. It was a phenomenon for sure.
Yeah. I think it's the point where, kind of leading to the next question of, do you feel culture after watching it? It's like you couldn't really feel cultured in having seen rom-coms or romance movies in general without having seen it. It just was like the epitome.
And I feel like something
in our generation
that's so great about it is this: it's not like it's a romance centered around the 1970s or the 2010s or whatever. It is it's like back in the 1940s, so it's like a period piece that's set back in time, but you follow their story, and it's not about like where they are or their phones or any technology. It is just about like these two people and their story, and it's something that can continue to endure the test of time. Yeah.
I think it was, I don't know how many movies it inspired afterwards, trying to like, pull those heartstrings. Did, I guess it would have been different. I was going to say, Big Fish.
I have not seen it.
I think that came out after this, but it's kind of like a similar like flashback style, life summary type movie type thing. I don't know if this really like inspired that, but I think there were a lot more movies of this kind of type trying to latch on to that momentum.
Yeah. And
after it,
obviously this is based on the book by Nicholas Sparks, as we talked about in the Before show. And I can tell you that all of his books have made me cry, like ugly cry. So, I mean, did A Walk to Remember come out before this?
The movie? I think it was in the 90s. Yeah.
Okay. So I read A Walk to Remember before I saw it, but I mean, like all of his books, I don't know why. Like, what does this man have against like people's hearts? Because
he hates people and being too happy.
All get me. Every book has just like straight to the heart.
All right. So I don't remember who went first last time for notes. Would you like to go first?
Sure. Okay, so my first note is lol at the CGI birds that are like flying at the house in the beginning. Well, first of all, like the whole intro credits was like a little over the top dramatic for me, just like very slow, but almost like at this point, like stereotypical, like sound plinky plunky soundtrack, rom-com music.
I think this was like showing the movie was like still in the 90s trying to escape into the 2000s. Like it just felt very much like that, like long extended musical introduction, artsy,
like a score, not a soundtrack. Like it is scored to be this kind of like rom-com lovey soundtrack. But the CGI made me laugh because the birds were just, it was funny. And the 20 years later, we've really advanced in that department. My next note is, how does Noah get down from the Ferris wheel? Because I couldn't remember exactly when he launched himself in there. And so like I was paying attention to that. And then he's hanging there. And then he's still hanging there. And they're like, Noah, get down. Or like, there's no more than 2 to a car. But like, bruh, you stopped the car at like 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock. Like he can't get down from there.
You could have stopped him when he was at 5 o'clock and just brought him back down.
Or you could have let it go all the way around with him sitting in the cart and then let him get off. But you stop it when he's up there, and then he pulls his whole romantic stunt, which I'll talk about in just a second. And then he's just hanging there. And then the scene ends. And I'm like, but I need to know how he got down.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Like it took me a while to get past that.
Did he then like swing himself back over with his pants still down?
Yeah, and then his pants are down. His pants are down multiple times in this movie, and I'm like, how did you walk up the steps with your pants around your ankles? How did you get off of the Ferris wheel with your pants around your pants around your ankles? Like, I don't know. I just have a lot of unanswered questions.
I'm starting to think this Nicholas Sparks guy does not understand the physics of how to walk with your pants around your ankles.
Exactly. I don't know. Nicholas Sparks. Something you should look into.
Right. Try it sometime.
So, but this note is a couple notes down, but I have the note of love bombing. And like he sees her in this carnival and like 3 seconds later, he's like, go on a date with me. I'm going to hang from a Ferris wheel and I'm going to force you into dating me. You're saying no, but I'm going to insist that upon myself. And like teenage me was like, oh my God, he loves her so much. God, that's so hot. And like adult me is kind of like, I think she said no.
Those kind of things really work better if you're Ryan fucking Gosling. If you are not like the epitome of like the good looking guy of the time, it comes off real creepy and real cringy and just real like you need to have a secret word for your friends to like help you get out of their situation.
Yeah. And maybe that's because, I mean, not that I've had someone hanging from a Ferris wheel in front of me, but like the times where before you when someone was like, and I was like, I'm I'm not here for this right now. Like I'm just
doubling
hanging out with my
down on
friends.
it or quadrupling down on it. You're just kind of like, yeah, I made it worse. Please cease and desist.
And then like he keeps like he's following her around town, and we're gonna go on a date, and then he just like shows up at the movies with Finn, and I don't know, they like orchestrate this whole thing, and I was just like, at that point, like I would be pissed. Like I would get to the point where like stubborn me, which is a really strong trait that I'm still feel like I'm trying to work on, like would just take me heels and be like, I said no, like I am not into this. It's not cute. Like you're just being too much.
There's definitely like a dark remix of this movie where like he comes on real strong like that, and she has to like get a restraining order in the 40s.
And that like that's what I kept thinking the whole time watching this is like how different her life is being in the 40s, and like she makes all her decisions with her parents, and like she doesn't really think for herself, and she just studies, and like she just doesn't have that like or like, oh, maybe I should go to therapy and like work through this like love that my parents forced me out of, and like her mom like her mom needs some therapy too, like I didn't marry the love of my life, and like I don't know, there was just so much where like it's like
this background would play very differently in different decades for sure.
Yep. It was definitely, it makes it interesting to watch though, because then it like has me thinking the whole time instead of just like watching. It's like, well, how would this be different? How would this be different? So I appreciate that from just a like, let me be intellectual about it standpoint, but it definitely would be different now. My next note is Rachel McAdams reminds me of Amy Jo Johnson.
Again.
I'm gonna flip it and reverse it. Rachel McAdams reminds me of Amy Jo Johnson from Power Rangers, Pink Ranger.
I can kind of see it.
Like not a lot, but I feel like kind of the way, like the bubbly personality, at least in this movie, like the way she carries herself. And they like kind of look alike.
Yeah. Amy Jo Johnson playing Kimberly is much more of a like stereotype that she's trying to play versus what Rachel McAdams is trying to play here. But I can kind of see it of like the bubbly, like, you know, oh my gosh, type style.
I think I've seen like I've seen enough Power Rangers recently. I don't actually watch it.
To our 4-year-old who loves the OG Power Rangers.
When our child insists on watching the 1990 Power Rangers, I hear it in the background, and I mean I watched it at the time. I lived it, but when like I've heard her voice enough recently and like seen just like little clips of her that I was like, she's familiar, or Rachel McAdams like feels like somebody else, and that was like who I connected her to.
Gotcha.
So,
I kind of see it.
It was just like then I couldn't unsee it, and I kind of ruined the rest. Not in a bad way, but it's just like then I was like thinking about Kimberly from the Power Rangers for the rest of the movie.
What are the age differences between the two, and could they have had Amy Jo Johnson play the mom in this?
I don't think it's close enough.
Or I think it's too. The age
I think they would be too close in age, because Rachel McAdams was 26 when this came out, but I would imagine that they were still too close in age. Okay, so my next note is I've kind of talked about this. Watching this as a 30-year-old versus watching this as a teenager is very different. Mostly, it was that like the love bombing was like too much for me. It was too aggressive, and then like the 30-year-old me was like almost more interested in the older versions of them. And I also feel like we missed out on a lot of like, once Noah and Allie get together, like I found myself like, oh, but like, how does she tell him that they're together? Or I mean, I guess she shows up and shrugs her shoulders, but like what happens after they hug in the blanket, and like what's about their wedding and their kids? And like, I wanted to see a lot more of that, as opposed to their
like the miniseries would come into play.
Exactly. As opposed to their like aggressive, like making out on the street and shoving ice cream in each other's faces. And like that to me as a teenager was like, oh my God, that's what love is. I want that. And then like 30-year-old me is like, okay, it's great being in love, but like, tell me about their like life together.
Yeah. Do they talk about things? What sort of life do they build together?
Yeah. So it was just a really interesting experience watching it now.
So speaking of them, like as an older couple though, I have a note myself where I could kind of see it in some situations, but for the most part, it was really hard for me to picture old Noah as young Noah grown up.
Honestly, I thought they did such a good job casting. I totally saw both of them. I don't know why. Because I don't like, not like they look alike or anything, but something about them just, I was like, I guess it feels right.
I think coming at it from looking at Forrest Gump with like young Forrest and old like Tom Hanks Forrest Gump, where it was just so believable of it being the same person, like speaking the same way, all that sort of stuff. It didn't quite seem the same way of young Ryan Gosling to
I appreciate
older
that.
Noah as believable. They were like some of the mannerisms or in the way like he had it kind of talked to you, kind of picture some of those things in a way, but so much of it just seems like such a different person. Obviously, he's going to grow up and change over 50 years, but just to something that didn't fully feel totally believable to me. That every time they showed the older couple, I'm like, I think they could have done some things to make it.
I think they could have written it a little bit, like to have a little bit more of those, like, because like he's so out there with Allie in the beginning. Have like a couple more of those like kind of out there moments to make it more believable to the audience.
Like not just like not catchphrases necessarily, but like things that maybe he says a couple times as younger Noah that you hear him say again as older Noah.
Yeah,
would kind of tie that together a little better.
I agree. I mean, I thought it was better than I thought it was going to be when I was watching it, but I do appreciate that. I think they could have like pushed it a little bit more. My next note is I want to be like Mr. Calhoun when I grow up as a parent. Noah's dad, because I feel like he just like welcomed her right into his house, even though they were sitting on the porch, and he was like kind of teasing with his, like, you can tell he had such a good relationship with Noah, and like, you know, he was like stuttering and like just like going right out there and telling, and like of course he's super embarrassed, but just like throwing all that stuff right out there, and just like, let's make breakfast, and like, but it's 10 o'clock. You can have pancakes.
Yeah, there's no rules here.
And I feel like, so that's something that we're really good at, is just like, oh, we want to do this at this random time. Okay, sure. And I just so loved that like spirit and energy that he brought to his relationship with his son and his son's girlfriend, even though they're only teenagers. And especially like you see all of that, and then it just hard pivots to her parents, who are just horrible. Like from the start, you're like, oh God, you have such a terrible relationship, that I was like, oh my God, yeah, I want to be like his dad. Yeah.
It's definitely a stark contrast of viewing her for like what you want her to be someday versus viewing her for what you like, what she wants to do. And then you see like the contrast with him, where like the dad is like, you know, I want to be a good dad to him, help him out with the problems he has in the moment, and those kind of things, and just like be there for him. It definitely shows that the juxtaposition there
for sure. And so my next note is when they go to the old house and they start undressing in front of each other. I have never witnessed something more uncomfortable in my entire life.
If you want to make something uncomfortable, like do it that way, the way they did it. That's
like just like one article of clothing standing, like not even like close to each other, like across the room, and just staring at each other. I was super, I mean, as I wasn't even physically there, but like as an audience member, I was like, oh, I'm so uncomfortable. You could do this so much better.
In like a weird haunted house place too. Like everything about that was just kind of like,
and she was so chill with how dirty it was. And I'm like, she is a lady of class. And I find it hard to imagine that she wouldn't be like, this is a little gross here. There's spider webs everywhere.
Probably
like,
rats running around.
Right. But yeah, the undressing scene was super uncomfortable. And especially for how like passionate and like all over each other they've been from like the second they're like, you know, they do that walk on the street and dance, and then it's like, oh, I'm gonna like run and jump into your arms, and I'm gonna tackle you here, I'm gonna tackle you here, and then it's like finally time for them to have sex, and it's so uncomfortable. They
just like stare at each other like, okay, I'll show you this part. All right, your turn. Okay.
Yeah. Accurate.
Yeah.
It was very uncomfortable. Okay, my next note is, okay, so then I didn't take notes for a really long time. And when the mom, we find out the mom like took all the letters and that she keeps them and gives them to her. I kind of feel like I would never do this. Like I would never steal my children's letters to like, I would never do that. But if I'm going to do it, I'm going to destroy all the evidence. I'm not going to hold on to them and have them wrapped up in a nice bow. Are you kidding me?
Those are loose ends.
They would be burned to a crisp. I mean, for the story's sake, I'm glad she kept them.
I'd probably read them. But
I'd 100% read them, and then I'd burn them.
Right.
But I don't believe, and maybe they're trying to appeal to like, she loved her boyfriend.
She's been in a situation
She's been there, so she was trying to save her daughter from, you know, falling into that life that she didn't want her to have. but she also like has been there and like didn't want to keep them from her. I don't know, but I feel like keeping them after all that time, I don't buy it.
Yeah. For sure. I would have gotten rid of all the evidence, and I just don't understand like why she would have kept it unless she was already planning on showing her someday, which that to me is even like more fucked up. That
especially when she got engaged to Lon and they were like buying wedding dresses, blah blah blah.
Like all right, and now into the furnace.
Yep, we're just done with these. I don't know. It just seemed like a questionable choice to keep them after all those years. Okay, and then my last note is completely actually unrelated to the movie, but is about Rachel McAdams. And that is that this movie came out the same year as Mean Girls, where Rachel McAdams plays a high school student. And I just need to let that sink in for a second.
That feels about right, because high school students are generally like in their mid-20s. In Hollywood, at least.
100%, especially in 2004. Everybody, like the OC cast was all like 25, except for Misha Barton. And Rachel McAdams was also...
I feel like she was in
George,
everything for like a good like 3+ year span.
I like watching this though. I'm like, I really love you as an actress though. I feel like she is such a good, especially for rom-coms. I feel like she is such a good main character of like, she's very beautiful, but it's not like intimidatingly beautiful. She's just like, you feel very like connected to her almost. And she's not like, you don't hate her. Like she seems very like, I hate to use the phrase girl next door, but like just like very likable as a person.
So she was 26 in this?
Yes.
Which means that About Time, which came out 10 years later, then she was 36.
Yes.
And then she's 46 now.
Yes.
Yeah, that doesn't feel right. Wow.
Anyways, I don't think I realized that About Time was 10 years later.
Yeah. I was like putting it together. I was like, okay.
But also I feel like she hasn't aged.
Yeah. She kind of stayed that same age. Yep. That's why it felt so wrong to me. I'm like thinking that she's 46 now. I'm like, oh, okay, well.
I actually think she's 47 right now.
Crazy.
Given what Wikipedia told me.
She is, I don't think I've seen her in anything that's come out in the past couple of years, maybe.
Not off the top of my head.
But I feel like she's aged fairly well.
Oh, yeah.
Than Nicole Kidman, so.
Yeah, that was rough. A Family Affair is great if you haven't seen it. We regret not podcasting it because it was
Netflix,
yeah. Zac Efron, Joey King, Nicole Kidman. We had a good time with it.
Great rom-com that we should have pulled out the podcast set before we watched it.
We regret it.
But hindsight is 2020.
Anyways.
Or 2024. Is that your last note?
Your turn. That's my last note.
Okay, so my first note was E from Entourage. We covered that. My first real note was that the acting in this was worse than I remembered.
Yes.
Especially,
I didn't find it super believable. Like their relationship and like
the first couple of scenes
chemistry.
When they're younger just felt so they were reading from a script. And the nurses in the present day whatever, they also were clearly reading from a script to the point where I'm like, do you understand the script you're reading from? It feels like you're reading just sentences. There's no understanding of the context or the emotion or anything. You were just reading words.
Yep.
That I don't know if they were just rushing the script in some ways. It also seemed like a lot of the scenes they were almost ad-libbing.
The nurses?
The younger ones.
Yeah. I definitely felt like I didn't buy the chemistry between Rachel McAdams and Ryan Gosling. I just every time I'm trying to think of his name, I just hear "I'm just Ken," and then I get sidetracked for a second.
Her and Ken, yeah.
It takes me a second to come back. Like I had a hard time believing them, even like once they like aged up 7 years or whatever it was after the war, and when they get back together. It's like you want to believe that they're supposed to be together because you've like watched the movie and you've seen like their relationship, but it's not as believable as I remember it being as a kid.
Yeah. I think I could see this being a situation where the director had like a rough idea of the script, but gave them more of an idea and then said, go ahead, just like talk. We'll keep recording. We'll splice it together. Because I did feel later in the movie that there were some scenes like in the, what do you want scene where he's like confronting her, that it seemed like they just probably like said the lines or did the scene a couple of different ways and they spliced it together in the edit. Just based on how it kind of felt slightly choppy looking at it with a more critical eye. Watching it the first, time or two, I didn't really notice it as much, but this time watching it, I could kind of tell when they were doing, a single take and they were, it was the same frame And then when they switched cameras, it felt like it was clearly from a different take they were editing in.
I can see where you're coming from for that. Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's like, it felt like they had to live up to the hype of this scene. But I also just like can imagine Ryan Gosling just like having a hard time taking it seriously and like laughing through a lot of it. And then like him like trying to hold it together and be serious, but like he's still kind of laughing. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know if some of those were like just trying to, they were rating it in that they had just like a nice, happy, flowy relationship, whatever, or if it was just, I don't know.
I'll read the book and get back to you of what Nicholas Sparks was intending.
I appreciate that. I kind of talked about this earlier, that she went from hating Noah to wanting to walk home with him alone in the dark in the city in the span of an hour of watching, or like in the span of watching a movie together.
Yeah.
Just didn't make sense to me. That was kind of like a real.
It was. And like they were sitting on opposite sides of their friends. So it's not like they even like went into the movie sitting next to each other and then they like sit in the movie and then we're going to walk home together. Like, okay, bye. What?
It would have been more believable to me if it had been a situation where like she had kind of like gotten up at like to go to the restroom or get popcorn, whatever, and he like followed her out and they like ended up talking through the rest of the movie and the friends were like, what are you doing? And like then they were like, we're all going to walk home together. Would have been much more believable to me than being like, we sat next to each other in mostly silence or whispers for an hour and 5 minutes, then we decided to walk home together even though I hated him an hour ago.
Yeah, because I was eating popcorn and he looked at me like
just stared
and
at her.
I was like, I'm eating my popcorn, and then he like kind of looked at me and then we were like, yeah, we're gonna walk home together. Yeah, it just, I needed something to happen to believe the switch of her, because like I understand, like you might not like someone, especially someone that aggressive. Ooh, give me some space. But like I need something to happen for me to believe that you're going to change your feelings and be like, okay, like we can walk home together. For sure.
My next note was, there are no, as far as I know, there are no rocks on beaches in South Carolina.
Yeah, you were pretty upset about that.
And they show them swimming and there's these gigantic boulders in the water. And that to me just screams that that scene was filmed in California. I couldn't find any evidence to prove that on Wikipedia at least, and a quick Google search.
I've seen no rock formations on the East Coast in my lifetime.
Right. And it just seems like every beach on the West Coast has that. And
like, I feel like between you and I, we've covered a good portion of the East Coast. We road tripped the whole East Coast as little young ducklings.
And we've road tripped a significant portion of the West Coast.
Yes. And I saw a lot more rocks on the ocean on the West Coast than the East Coast.
I don't know if that was like a quick little added addition in the last shot or in post where they wanted to add this beach scene, because from what I could tell, most, if not all of the filming took place like in the Charleston area, plus or minus an hour.
I was like, because as soon as you pointed it out, but I was like, so much of the rest of the setting is very obviously South Carolina, whether it's specifically Charleston or somewhere like in that area. But like having been to South Carolina many times and driven through it, like it's not like they just did that in California.
Yeah. That was weird to me. But then another thing that kind of points to it being a weird understanding of the location was we're seeing like their breath in the nighttime when they're like talking, and it's summertime and it's in South Carolina. It does not get that cold at nighttime in the summer in South Carolina. It's very hot here in Virginia. It's much hotter down in South Carolina.
Either they must have been filming in off seasons.
They're wearing long sleeves and like a robe, and he's like smoking a cigar, and this is probably July. That dude would be covered in sweat and be
so upset
ripping layers on. Like, it is so hot all the time. Yeah. Unbelievable.
Yeah, it is. I mean, we live north of South Carolina, and it is hot outside. I mean, even right now, it's still 74 degrees.
And it's
my
cool
breath.
This week. My
breath would not be showing outside, and it, like you said, it is a cool week. I mean, my watch says it's only going to get up to 80 today.
Like last week at this time, it was still like 89 degrees.
Yep. At
this time of night, almost midnight. It's unbelievable that this guy's just in there.
If you delivered me home to my parents' house at this time of night in Virginia, my breath would not be showing.
No, and with no air conditioning, we'd be just coated in sweat.
Yep. Oof.
Understand,
no, thank you.
Understand that the East Coast is different from the West Coast, Hollywood, please. My next note was James fucking Marsden. We've been watching, or we watched earlier this year, the Jury Duty.
And by earlier this year, you mean we finished it like last week?
I was trying to give us some sort of credit there. Watching that where James Marsden is...
We've been watching a lot of good shows, though.
Is playing himself as like a caricature version of himself.
A dramatized version.
If you have not seen Jury Duty, go ahead and watch it. It also made it much harder to take him seriously because he was playing such a caricaturized version of himself in the movie.
And because, like, I know James Marsden mostly from Hairspray. Like, I've seen him in other things. Like, I know of him from other things. But in my mind, like, he's in the Hairspray movie. And I always forget that he's in this. But, like, the fact that in Jury Duty, he's like, oh, yeah, I'm in the Notebook. Like, in the Notebook, it's, like, keeps referring to the Notebook. And, like, the whole time we were watching it, I was like, we're going to be watching it's at some point soon. Like, it's coming up. I know it's coming up. And it was weird to watch him, especially having just watched him in that, which was from what, like 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
He plays such a hateable character in Jury Duty.
So hateable. But, like, you know, within the last couple of years, but then, like, seeing him like 20 years back, then that was really confusing for my brain. And it was weird. And
yeah. And this, you're almost rooting for him.
Yep.
It's
like, you're not rooting for him, but you're like, you're also not a bad guy.
There's no bad choices here. My next note was that I mentioned it's a hard time seeing old Noah as young Noah. Next note was that they go out on this paddling adventure out on the creek, whatever, and she's wearing these like over the top high heels. Like this, like, it's one thing to be kind of like wearing a semi nice dress. Wearing heels when you're, I don't know if she knew that she was going out on a boat. I don't know if she like packed flip flops, whatever, or something like more comfortable. But to me, it just kind of seems so like not ready for the environment. Just wearing heels, just paddling around on a creek.
I'm giving her the benefit of the doubt because, number one, it's 1947. I believe. They said it was 7 years after the original meeting, which was in 1940. And, like, I don't think you didn't wear heels. Like, I think you just wore heels.
That's what shoes were.
Like, that's just, like, I don't think flip-flops. Like, I don't even think sneakers were a thing. Like, you wore some kind of heel.
Some sort of flats.
Like, I think most things had, like, a heel. If nothing else. So I was giving her the benefit of the doubt for that. In addition, she's also like shows up at his house and he's like, let me take you somewhere, or like whatever it is. And then they just like end up on a boat that I don't think she was expecting to be going.
To be an adventure
on a boat. Yeah. So I was giving, like, as a woman, getting dressed can be really difficult because you can wear any number of things and be incorrect in all the ways that, like, I think it was just a bunch of errors.
She should have worn jeans, a t-shirt, and just some sneaks.
I can tell you that was not a thing in the 1940s.
Or some flops.
But that is very much my uniform today.
Yeah. Next note was that this should be a mini-series. We talked about that. And my last note was that it felt like, at least towards the end, that Ryan Gosling was acting circles around Rachel McAdams. That she just didn't seem like I don't know if it was the way that it was edited together or cut, but it didn't seem like she was fully able to make it believable what she was like saying and doing and the acting and everything.
She almost felt like she was acting a caricature of the character she was supposed to be playing. Like she was like a little too over the top with this like 1940s. Oh my God, I couldn't possibly, especially the fact that it takes place in the South just like makes it so much
Her
worse.
accent, I feel like it kind of came in and out too.
I think everybody's accents went in and out because that was the accents were the hardest thing for me. And also all of them. I feel like their acting, it's like, I either like really believed it or I really didn't. It was like for everybody. It wasn't just like the whole time I believed him and not her or whatever. Like the whole time I was kind of like, I don't really know how much I buy all of this.
Yeah, I think her character also was a fairly difficult, complex character to really pull off anyways. But it just felt like I thought that he did a better job acting, at least towards the end, where it didn't feel like he was reading off of a script as much, as often as she was. Yeah,
like you could definitely see his like heart sickness for her. But like something that I wasn't really appreciating until I watched it this time was like the complexity of her character. Like obviously his character has his own layers of drama, but just like, you know, like all the stuff she goes through with her parents and them like not wanting her to do that, like not wanting her to be with him, and just like that drama that they put on her, and then just like they're getting ready to have sex and then she's like, talk to me, and like that whole like she just literally goes crazy. I mean, it is so cringy to watch. It's like, oh my God, why are you stop talking? And then she like falls in love with Lon, and just like there's just so much to her, like so many ups and downs.
Relationship with her parents, everything. I
didn't fully appreciate all that there was to her character until this time, and I took a lot more away from it this time than I had in the past.
Yeah, I think Ryan Gosling's character had a bit more of an understandable flow and arc to it.
Yeah, and like he's the more like middle class, like, or working class, I guess, but like he's the relatable one, and she's this like high society person. But
anyways, that's the end of my notes.
Yeah, I feel like I had other things to say. Like there was so much more that I thought. I'm so glad we put this movie in here. Like it really reaffirmed our choice to like add this in as an extra one because of how much we had to say about it and how much I took from it, especially coming off of all of these terrible, honestly, rom-coms that we've watched this season. Although I do still stand by Mystic Pizza.
I think we have at least one good one coming up after this, and I'm hopeful for the finale or how we finish this season. But
yes, but it has been
down up to this point.
Pretty big letdown. So The Notebook was kind of like a redeeming, like there is a reason that this was such a big deal. And given that we've watched other rom-coms, this one has definitely showed us that it has its place as like the king of rom-coms.
Yeah.
Or the queen, I don't know. But anyways, with that, thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, comments, thoughts, concerns about anything that we talked about or any notes or things to add.
About anything.
Yes, we don't know anything. We are just here talking. So if you have anything you want to add, you can feel free to leave any comments on our Instagram. You can follow us at Culture Night Pod. Or if you want to email us, you can email us at culturenightpod@gmail.com. If you are if you are listening to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, if you could rate and review and share with your friends. And if you are watching us on YouTube, thank you for looking at our beautiful faces. If you could subscribe to our YouTube channel and like this video, we would much appreciate you. So thank you so much for joining us tonight, and catch you in the next one.
Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers.